The whole workshop will be in English, so let's do this in English. That's very excited. We have like the opportunity to connect Silicon Valley in Brazil. I knew Bret. I met Bret in Stanford at Stanford University. He has a huge portfolio in Silicon Valley. He has been teaching for a long time, so he knows what he's talking about. And it's a great opportunity to have him today here with us in this webinar. And of course, I'm very excited to host Bret in São Paulo, because we have an event with him in a Hyper XP Masterclass on September 19th. And it will be a wonderful event.
Okay, let's start, Bret. So I had the opportunity to go to Silicon Valley last year in September, and to do one of these missions that are so hype right now, right? Visiting startups, incubators, VCs, and a lot of good stuff. Tell us, what is it that makes Silicon Valley such a special place for startups, entrepreneurship, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say thank you for this. I'm excited to be on this call, and I'm excited that next week I'm making my very first trip to Brazil. So I'm looking forward to it, especially the food. So what makes Silicon Valley so special? It's a great question, and I've been lucky enough to have lived here my whole life. I grew up in Silicon Valley in a town called Los Gatos, and I've spent my whole career here. And it's pretty amazing that if you go pretty much anywhere in the world today, I mean, like literally anywhere in the world today, and you say, what do you think the most important companies in the world today are? Chances are pretty good that the person is going to say Google, Facebook, Instagram, Apple, and all of those companies are headquartered within about 10 kilometers of where I'm sitting right now. And so it really is a pretty amazing sort of moment in history that so many of the important companies around the world all came from this one place, this one valley. And a lot of people try to figure out, why is that? Why is it that this one place has ended up becoming such an incredible center of innovation, center of entrepreneurship, center of economic growth? And I think there are a lot of different reasons for that. Whole books have been written about this topic. But I think it boils down to a couple of things. One is great universities that Stanford University and the University of California at Berkeley and Santa Clara University, which is actually the oldest university in California, are all located here. And great innovation, of course, starts with really smart people. And so the fact that this area has these three great universities is certainly a factor. Another factor, honestly, is that the weather here is just great. It's a funny thing to say, but it's true that the weather here in Silicon Valley is just sort of perfect all the time. Right, Leandro?
Yeah, definitely.
And so, historically, as over the last 50 years or so, a lot of smart people from the East Coast of the United States or the Midwest of the United States, where it's cold and snowy and miserable, have chosen to come to this special place where the weather is great. And I love Rodrigo's comment that he just put into the chat box that this is why there's not innovation in the UK, because the weather is terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other thing, and I think that the single biggest reason why in my lifetime Silicon Valley has become this incredible economic engine that it is today is a culture of giving back. a culture of reinvestment, a culture of reinvestment of not only financial capital, but also reinvestment of intellectual capital. That was a very famous university professor at Stanford, professor of engineering at Stanford named Fred Terman. And he encouraged, this is the 1940s and 1950s, he encouraged his students to finish their studies, and then instead of leaving and going back to the East Coast and going to work for big companies on the East Coast, he encouraged them to instead stay in the Bay Area and start their own companies. And this professor even invested in some of these companies. Most famously, of course, when David Packard and Bill Hewlett finished their studies under him, they left and started Hewlett Packard, HP. And Fred Terman, this professor, thought so highly of them that he not only helped them out, but also actually invested in HP. And so, sort of way back in the 40s and 50s, this culture of reinvestment emerged in Silicon Valley. And I think more than anything else, it's that culture of reinvestment, as I said, not only financial capital, but also intellectual capital, that everybody in Silicon Valley, once you've been successful, the first thing you want to do is you want to start helping younger entrepreneurs and teaching younger entrepreneurs everything you've learned in your own career, and start investing in them. It's funny. I always laugh about how in Silicon Valley, so in most parts of the world, once a professional person has had some success and made some money, the first thing they want to do is they want to buy a vacation home for their family, or they want to buy a big fancy boat, or something like that, right? In Silicon Valley, as soon as anybody makes some money, the first thing they want to do is become an angel investor.
Right.
And so, again, I think it's that culture of reinvestment that ends up being an important component.
And like you said a couple of times already, not financially, but giving back the knowledge, the experience, the support,
Exactly.
even maybe psychological support.
Yeah.
To young entrepreneurs. It's a different mindset. And do you see that in other places in the US, or is that particular to the Bay Area?
I think it's very particular to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of other, so Austin, Texas is a smaller center of innovation, center of tech entrepreneurship these days. And I've got a couple of friends down there that are very active in accelerator programs and incubator programs where they're helping out new entrepreneurs. So I think it does exist elsewhere, but I think it's uniquely powerful in Silicon Valley.
Okay, so you teach at Stanford, and you mentioned a couple of other good schools in California that have a lot of these people gravitating around. But there are other very good schools in other places in the world, right? So what is it that these schools do that maintain them up to date? How do they reinvent themselves through time?
The schools themselves?
Yes.
Oh, that's a whole different topic, and I think a very good topic that higher education, meaning universities all over the world.
Because we are seeing different models appearing here and there, right? Schools that don't have teachers, schools that don't have diplomas, schools where you don't pay. I mean, they're all.
Yeah, and it's I'm not an expert in this field, but I can tell you that I think it's one of the fascinating things right now is that universities all over the world are trying to figure out what it will mean to be a successful university 50 years from now, because for the most part, universities are using the same model that they've used for 100 years, right?
Yes.
And it's a much different world today. And so, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of interest in what they called MOOCs, massive online something classrooms. So sort of this idea of doing classes online. So there's a lot of innovation going on. I can't tell you for sure what I think will end up succeeding. I do think that, so my prediction worldwide is that the top tier universities will be fine, because there's always going to be a lot of value in going to a Harvard or Stanford or a Cambridge or Oxford or the great universities in Brazil. But it's the second and third tier universities that I think are going to need to change pretty dramatically.
Okay, so one of the things that we told people about this webinar is that we were going to be talking a little bit about skills, the future of work and the skills that are necessary to be successful in the future. And you held some C-level positions, and you were the CEO of one or two different companies, right?
Yep.
So as a CEO of a successful company, what did you look for when you were interviewing candidates for positions in your company, on your team?
Great question. And I think that for any executive, and especially for any entrepreneur, the quality of the team is going to be the single biggest factor in the success or failure of an organization. And so if that's true, if it's true that the biggest factor in the success or failure is going to be the quality of the team, then how do you select the right team, right? For me personally, I'm interested in people who have the habits of a lifelong learner, meaning that people who are just really good at learning whatever they need to learn. And the reason is that I think that 20 years ago, we hired for knowledge. So if we were looking for a Python programmer, we looked for somebody who had deep experience of many years of programming in Python. And today, I think that's actually the wrong way to hire, because the skills required are changing so quickly. You hire somebody today who's a Python expert. 2 years from now, Python isn't going to be the hot language. It's going to be some other programming language, right? And so the question isn't, do you have deep Python programming skills? The question then becomes, are you the kind of person who will be able to quickly learn whatever you need to learn a year from now and 2 years from now? And so to me, that's the biggest single change, is that while 20 years ago, I might have been looking to hire people who had deep knowledge in a particular area. Today, I'm more interested in hiring people who have the skills and the ability and the aptitude to learn whatever they need to learn.
So that's a question that I have right there. How do I know what it is that I have to learn?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after I figure this out, how do I go about it?
So those of you who are on this call who are engineers, you guys all know that when you got your university degree in engineering, there's sort of fundamentals of engineering that apply across all the different disciplines. So in software engineering, there are fundamentals having to do with data structures, with algorithms, with data types. And it's fundamentally important that you understand those concepts. And then once you understand those concepts, then learning a particular programming language and switching to another programming language and learning about AWS and containerization and all this other stuff, you can learn all of that because you understand the fundamentals. And I think that's true across many disciplines. Now, Marcelo, you're asking me how to predict what you'll need to know next year. Right?
Give me the $1 million answer here. Yes.
I don't know about that, but I do think that, as I said, I do think there are some people who have the habits of a lifelong learner, meaning that they can always get up to speed on what they need to get up to speed on. And when I interviewed, I would tell you some of my little tricks when I was hiring a team. So one of my tricks is that when I put up a job post about a position I was hiring for, I would write the whole job post describing the position, describing what we're looking for, etc. And at the very end of the post, I would say, if this sounds like a good fit to you, then please send us an email and put the words "coffee sunshine" in the subject line of the email. And about 2/3 of the people who responded didn't do that because they didn't even read to the end of the post.
You didn't get to the end of the yeah.
And so if you can't take the time to
others may have thought it was a ridiculous demand that you made.
Whatever, but if you can't take the time to read the whole post and actually pay attention, then why would I want to hire you?
Yeah.
And so the fact that 2/3 of people didn't do that made it really easy. Those 2/3 I didn't even respond to, right? And now we've got
to put in the effort, yeah.
Right, exactly.
They put in the effort, so they don't deserve my time. That's correct. I feel the same way. Yeah.
Exactly. I think I'm going to talk about two things. One is I'm going to, sort of the first half of my talk, I think I'm going to focus on what I see as being the global trends right now, and where are the innovation opportunities. I just recently finished a research project where I interviewed 100 people around the world whose title is Director of Innovation or Head of Innovation or VP of Innovation for large companies. And it was an amazing project, having a chance to interview these top innovation executives at large corporates around the world. And from that little research project, I developed some patterns that I think sort of represent the trends in innovation around the globe today. And so I'll spend a little bit of time in Sao Paulo talking about, presenting the results of that research, what I see as trends and where I think the opportunities are for investors and for entrepreneurs.
So we'll be able to see that firsthand when you're here.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so curious. I'm so curious right now, but give us one nugget. One nugget.
Well, I think I already did. I mean, the nugget I already gave you was the fact that I think the fourth industrial revolution is going to be decentralized all over the world. Yeah, that's the only nugget I'm going to give you now.
Okay, all right.
It's very nice, guys. We have some good questions here. I think that Bret will be in Brazil, and most of people here, I know that they will be at the event in São Paulo. So definitely Bret will talk with everyone in São Paulo. People would like to know if they have job opportunities with you, Bret. People would like to know what you would like to do and what are your expectations about Brazil. People are asking about your connections with the Brazilian ecosystem that we know. I know that it's a wish because when I have been in Stanford, you told me you're thinking about the fourth industrial revolution. You know that Brazil is important and that's why you are showing up. So guys, what I'm really excited about, we have opportunity to have a real Stanford class in Brazil. I've been with Bret for a while when I have been in Silicon Valley, and we had my roommate, the people in my classroom. They are nice people, smart people from Google, from Facebook, from Salesforce. We had a bunch of really good entrepreneurs, and we could be together and we prove our skills, we prove our abilities. So have opportunity to host Bret in Brazil will be very nice to improve our abilities, to improve our skills. So I'm counting on you on this event, on this masterclass, September 19 in São Paulo. And also if you guys if you cannot be there, you can also see Bret in a one-day workshop in Floripa in September 14.